Good afternoon. Once again, good afternoon. I'm Steve Gregorian, President and CEO of the Detroit Economic Club. Thank you. Welcome to today's meeting. It's 91 years of incredible speakers, and that tradition continues today. I especially want to welcome our DEC members. If you're not a DEC member yet, give me 10 seconds to convince you. Your next job, prospect, client, maybe best friend is right in this room. So we invite you to join the club, invest in you, and join today. In fact, if you're interested, we'll sweeten the pot. If you sign up today on your way out, we'll give you a free event ticket you can use through the end of June. So thanks for considering that. As we get started, I would just ask you to silence your cell phone kindly so we don't disturb today's program. And if you've been with us before, you know we always begin with a pledge and a prayer. And I would ask you to stand and join me as we honor our country with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. And kindly remain standing as our invocation today will be delivered by Brother Gary Wegner, Capuchin Soup Kitchen. Brother?
Thank you, Steve. Today our country commemorates Cesar Chavez, God of all that is good, right, and just. Today we commemorate Cesar Chavez, the great advocate for farm workers who labor in the fields and vineyards of this bountiful land. We thank you for the blessings of this day. As we gather to listen to the words of the Honorable Senator Gary Peters, may we first listen to your word. As the prophet Isaiah proclaimed, "They shall live in the houses they build and eat the fruit of the vineyards they plant." May we labor to realize Isaiah's vision, echoed in the words of Cesar. We are certain God's will is that all men and women share in the good things this earth produces. When the days seem dark, may our hearts be uplifted by the witness of all who have known adversity and not given up. May we make our own the words, "It is possible to become discouraged about the injustice we see everywhere." But God did not promise us a world that would be humane and just. He gives us the gift of life and allows us to choose the way we will use our limited time on earth. It is an awesome opportunity. God of the springtime, may we seize this opportunity to pursue justice for the least of our sisters and brothers. Give us the tools we need to realize the hopes of all Americans and the dreams of those who come to these shores. We thank you for the lunch which we have enjoyed, even the beets that I chose not to eat. Bless the workers in the kitchen. Bless the servers who brought the food to our tables. And bless us all today, tomorrow, and for all eternity. Amen. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. You may all please be seated. Brother Gary, I want you to challenge yourself and try eating beets next time. They're pretty good. Very healthy for you, too. All right. A couple of thank yous. Thank you to WJR, who's doing their focus show live right outside this room, and we invite you to stop by after our program to watch the final 30 minutes of their program. Thanks to WDIV Local 4 and Lawrence Tech University and Detroit PBS for live streaming today's meeting. And I want to say thank you to Rich Homburg. You're out here. Thanks, and keep up the fantastic work, Rich, with Detroit PBS. Students are here today, and always courtesy of our generous corporate sponsors, and their morning already included a private reception with Senator Peters. And interesting, Brother Gary, that you mentioned Cesar Chavez Day, because Cesar Chavez is with us today. Their high school, some of the students is with us. Compliments of Strather Associates. We've also got Schoolcraft College, thanks to Strather Associates. The Dragons coming in strong with some really great questions at the student reception. And they're sponsored by Adam and Accenture. And then, of course, the Mustangs from Northville High School, thanks to Anita and DTE Foundation. So please join me to welcome the students and thank those sponsors. A couple things on your table super quick. I always want to take a moment and thank our terrific corporate sponsors and partners. Make no mistake, we would not be here if it wasn't for their generosity. So thank you, thank you, thank you. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor, we'd love to talk with you about that. Also on your table is our season lineup. We'll see you a couple times in April. In a couple weeks, April 14th, Governor Whitmer will be with us to talk about road funding and Michigan's economy. And about a week later, on a topic a bit lighter than road funding, the Detroit Lions will be here. President Rod Wood and some Lions beat writers will preview the upcoming Lions draft. And tickets, I want to tell you, this is a Lions crazy town. Tickets for that are almost sold out, and it is a large, large crowd. So get those early if you want to be at that one. So hope to see you at both of those meetings. I did mention already 91 years of speakers, and those speakers tell the history of our great country. 12 others have been at the DEC on this day, including Henry Kissinger in 1992, and Senator Peters, this is your 4th visit to the DEC, and we're always honored to host you. You are our 13th speaker on March 31st, so congratulations again, and thanks for being with us today. Thank you. Finally, we want you to use your smartphone, and you can be involved in today's program. Take lots of pictures, share with your social media networks, and you can submit a question for Senator Peters using the QR code on your table. And those questions will make their way to our presiding officer, who I'm about to put to work. Kimberly Andrews Espy is the president of Wayne State University and doing a terrific, terrific job there. We are so pleased. She's a Detroit Economic Club board member. She is an amazing supporter of the DEC and many, many things in our city, region, and state. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome President Espy.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm actually the 13th president, so there you go.
Perfect.
So thank you, Steve, and good afternoon, DEC members and guests. It is my pleasure to introduce today's guest speaker. U.S. Senator Gary Peters has been honored to represent the state of Michigan in the U.S. Senate since 2015. He is the ranking member of the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. He also serves as a member of the Armed Services Committee, Appropriations Committee, and Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. That's how I had the honor of working with Senator Peters almost a decade ago, when together we advanced OSIRIS-REx, which is an asteroid sampler, the James Webb Telescope that's understanding the origins of the universe, and other national, university-led, transformative fundamental science projects. In the U.S. Senate, Gary is recognized as one of the most effective and bipartisan senators. He recently was rated the #1 most effective U.S. senator by the nonpartisan Center for Effective Lawmaking for the 3rd Congress in a row for his ability to work across the aisle and to build coalitions. Gary was also the author and principal sponsor of 19 bipartisan bills signed into law during one of those Congresses, which was the most bills enacted into law by a U.S. senator during a single congressional session in over 40 years. Gary is the product of Michigan schools, including Wayne State University, I might add, and has lived in Michigan his entire life. Our moderator today is Nolan Finley, who needs no introduction to this audience or to Michigan for that matter. Everyone knows his work as the editorial page editor of the Detroit News. So please join me in giving a warm Detroit Economic Club welcome to Senator Peters and to Nolan Finley.
Well, thank you, President Espy. We appreciate that. And thanks all of you for joining us. Gary, I thought I'd start today by telling the story of how we first met, but I'm still too afraid of Colleen to go into any great detail. I'll just, let me just say it involved a little bit of whiskey.
Just a little bit.
The Goo Goo Dolls, a Los Angeles sheriff's deputy who got hopelessly lost in his own city. He was our driver. And the wife of a future senator who was pretty sure we had destroyed your political career by the end of that evening. So, but I guess that's enough to say.
Yeah, we know more. We know more.
So this is a timely time for this, timely day for this session and to hear from you, because we're in the middle of what Donald Trump calls Liberation Week, the implementation of his tariffs regime. And he has promised that this will lead to job creation, more manufacturing in Michigan, more investment across the country. And he says it'll be the greatest thing for the auto industry that we've ever seen. Sean Fain, the UAW president, agrees with him, as do some of your Democratic colleagues. The auto executives say, you know, he's putting the whole industry and the economy at risk. What's your take?
Yeah, I am concerned. I'll just put that out right now, although certainly I share the goal, which is about creating more jobs in the United States, particularly here in Michigan, making sure the auto industry, the domestic auto industry, is vibrant and is growing. So those goals are there. We've got to work at that. And tariffs can play a role in that. They have in the past, but they tend to be limited. They tend to be very focused, particularly if you've got some country that may be causing issues with the trade that you have to try to negotiate with, and then that is a tool. What we're seeing right now, and it's still in flux, I don't think we're really going to know exactly what's there for the next couple days, although we have a pretty good idea what's coming. But what we've seen with this administration is things can change on a dime pretty quickly. Yeah. And that is also part of the problem. If you're trying to help an industry and grow an industry, every businesses, and we're filled with very successful business people here in the room today, having some certainty is really important. Chaos is not good for business. It's really bad for business. You need to know what those rules are. But the way they're rolling out right now are going to have an impact, as you mentioned. Our auto executives have mentioned that. We know that parts are completely integrated, especially here in North America. As we sit here next to Canada, we know how important Canada is as a trading partner. Michigan, we're the largest trading partner with Canada in the country from a state. If we were a country, we would be one of the largest. We have parts that go back and forth in the border. And as that happens, if there are tariffs on those parts, which we believe there will be based on what we're hearing right now, that's going to have a big increase in cost. We've heard that from both our friends at General Motors and Stellantis and Ford Motor Company. In fact, some of those, and this is a tax, and some of those numbers could be in the thousands of dollars for a car. And let's be clear, new cars are not cheap now. It's tough for a lot of families to buy a new automobile, and now to add several $1,000s on top of that makes it even more unaffordable. And then you got to think of all of the spillovers from that. So you've raised the price of new cars, then what happens? That means used cars also get expensive. It doesn't just affect new cars. If you have repairs for that car, it gets more expensive because all the parts, everything is more expensive. And if repairs are more expensive, then auto insurance goes up for everybody who buys auto insurance, and we've seen big increases in auto insurance in recent years as well. So then the concern are reciprocal tariffs, the countries that are being impacted that are saying they're going to put tariffs on. If those tariffs go on, then that's going to impact our ability to export cars. That will have impact on jobs here in Michigan and as well as around the country. And it'll hurt other industries as well, depending on where those tariffs are. You know, I look back in the first Trump administration where he put on tariffs. They weren't as expansive as what we're looking at right now. But there was a recent economic study done that just came out a short time ago that looked at those tariffs and the impact, and they saw that it did have an increase in price. It did have minimal to no impact on jobs in manufacturing, but it had a really negative impact on a variety of other sectors that were hit by the reciprocal tariffs, particularly agriculture. And we're a big ag state. Right. You know, we make things, we grow things. This is who we are. So that does not make sense. And when you look at to get into the weeds a little bit here, he's also used emergency authorities for the initial round of tariffs on the border. And I am the ranking member on Homeland Security. I chaired Homeland Security, and it was a real blow to our friends in Canada. If you look at border security, you will not find a better partner anywhere in the world than the Canadians. I mean, we work hand in glove. We have Canadians that are on our Coast Guard vessels as ghost riders that are because of the border and how we have to work together. We've had an incredibly close relationship with Canadians. Canadians are our closest friend, our strongest ally, and as I talk to folks there, they feel like they've been punched in the gut and wonder what's happened to this amazing friendship that we've had forever. So there are so many repercussions here. I think I'm very concerned with what we're seeing.
Well, I want to stay with that thought because, you know, the popular wisdom has always been good trading partners make good allies. And if you build economic alliances, you're less likely to have a conflict with another country. These tariffs, particularly on our neighbors, Mexico and Canada, but also with the European nations, seems to be going against that theory. Is there a national security element to this?
Yeah, unquestionably, and you're right about that. When you think about national security, and I serve armed services, I'm Homeland Security, and I'm thinking about both internationally as well as here on the Homeland. And your point about allies, I think, is important, because if you think about in going into a conflict and why the United States is strong, why we are the strongest nation on earth, and it's for three reasons. One, we have a really strong economy, first and foremost. A strong economy is absolutely essential to have the economic muscle to have that kind of power. Second, we have the best military by far anywhere in the world, and that military power is an important aspect of that. But third, equally as important as the other two, is that we have friends.
Right.
You got to have friends. When you go into any kind of conflict or any kinds of issues, you don't want to go in by yourself. You want to go in with friends that are with you. It's a leverage for the power that you have. It helps to be on the moral right side of issues when we're facing some significant challenges overseas right now. And when you start whittling away, when you're harming an economy with these tariffs potentially, and you're alienating friends that we've had for a long time. I mean, we saw that with Ukraine. I mean, we could go down that road, but it's outrageous what we have seen in pulling back from this administration to an ally and a friend who's literally fighting to the death for their democracy, for their freedom, for their liberty. This sends a terrible signal around the world as to leadership from the United States.
Are we at risk of these putting us into a recession?
Yeah, I think it's possible. In fact, it's been raised, and you heard, actually the president, it was yesterday, the day before, said, that's okay if we go into a recession. I can honestly say, I don't know if I've ever heard an American president say it's okay that we go into a recession. I don't, someone can challenge me if we've had another president say that. I don't think it's ever happened, so that's a first.
So, Gary, we also seem to be going in a different direction than a lot of our traditional allies, traditional trading partners, Europe and Asia, on electric vehicles. This administration is pulling back its support for electric vehicles. What will that do to the future of this auto industry? Will it make us outliers, or do you believe the rest of the world will sort of pull back from EVs as well?
No, I don't think they're pulling back from EVs. It's always going to be a part of that portfolio. We're not saying everybody goes to EVs, but we know that's where the future is. We know the U.S. auto industry has been investing heavily in electric vehicles. It's one option for consumers to be able to use. It represents the future for a lot of reasons. Certainly climate is part of the issue, but I also look at it from an engineering perspective. One area that I've been very involved with over the last few years is autonomy in vehicles, autonomous vehicles, self-driving vehicles that will transform transportation. And when you think about it, first off, the autonomy is critically important for safety. When you think about today on our highways, nearly 40,000 people die on our highways every day. Roughly, over 100 people are going to die today on our highways. Nearly 90% of all those accidents are human error. And the technologies that are available now for autonomy, and you're seeing it in cars that are available now, keeping you in the lane, warning you about other vehicles. There is even more. You can have fully self-driving, which eventually will be down the road, which will be considerably safer. Not to say there'll be zero accidents, but you're not going to have 40,000 people dying and hundreds of thousands of people with debilitating injuries from this. And the engineers, and I've spent long sessions with engineers at Ford and GM, and really could be the nerd that I like to be on some of this stuff. And they're telling you the ideal power plant for these technologies is electric, because they're basically computers with lots of sensors and computers. An electric power plant is the most efficient way to have fully autonomous cars with the amazing safety features. So it's part of the future. And for the United States to say no, we'll let the Chinese do that. The Chinese are investing massive amounts of money into electrification and into automation. They're in Europe. They've basically gone into Europe. Now they've engaged in a lot of dubious trading policies to get into Europe, and they're really challenging the European automakers. And we don't want to let that happen here in the United States. We need to make sure our auto industry is sound. And I'll just end by saying, when you think about the auto industry, and we know it here in Michigan, this is who we are, but you cannot have a manufacturing sector in this country if you don't have a strong and vibrant auto sector. Autos just drive so much of manufacturing, no matter what you make. And I'm thinking from a national security perspective here in Michigan, and the work I've been doing for the industrial supply chain, for the military supply chain. In Michigan, we're not just making combat vehicles for the Army, we're also doing incredible work for the Air Force with advanced fighter systems. I was just at an event recently and have been working with the United States Navy to do a lot of work for building the next generation submarines. And a lot of that work is going to be done here in Michigan because we know how to make things. So it's where we have to go.
So you've proposed a National Institute for Manufacturing and a Chief Manufacturing Officer for the country. How do you envision that working, and how should the government and manufacturers be interacting?
Well, yeah, the government can help in a lot of respects, and we have, I think, I'm trying to remember now, I think there's 18 different manufacturing programs that the federal government has, but they're spread out over like 9 departments. Or something to that. I mean, it's all spread out. They have important help from design to safety, all sorts of aspects. What I'm proposing is let's put it under one umbrella so you don't have duplication, you don't have wasted money. Let's focus instead of everybody doing their own thing. How do we harmonize that in a way? And manufacturing is so important. I don't think you can be a great country if you don't actually make things. So manufacturing is got to be the driver. And we know all the other countries around the world understand that, and they're partners. I want to be a partner with manufacturing, that we should do it as well, but we should do it smarter than we do it right now. Everybody's got their little fiefdom. How do we come together? It's been a big part of the work that I do. In fact, I'm doing it on another area to take this in a little bit of a direction, but cybersecurity, which is probably one of our #1 national security and homeland security threats. And it's the same thing. We've got all of these different agencies all proposing all sorts of regulations, and all of our firms, I'm sure a lot of you deal with that. You got to deal with several government agencies when you should really just be focused on making sure your cyber systems are as secure as possible. So I have a bill to harmonize that into one place.
Well, I think that raises another issue that's been on our minds lately, and that's artificial intelligence. And it seems like progress in that industry, in that field, is way outpacing the regulatory infrastructure. How do we catch up?
Yeah, it's a really hard problem. You're right. The question, AI, it's with us right now, and it's accelerating at a dramatic pace, and it is certainly behind regulation. We don't really have a broad regulatory framework in this country for it to make sure that we balance. First off, you got to balance. We want the innovation. There's no question the promises of artificial intelligence are immense when it comes to productivity, efficiency in research and scientific research. Being able to figure out how to design new chemicals. We may have tools to allow us to cure diseases that we never thought we could cure. I mean, the promise is immense, so we don't want to step on any of that. But on this other hand, there's like all major technologies, there's a dark side too, and it can be used for nefarious purposes. So you want to make sure that there are controls in place to make sure there's transparency, to make sure there's auditing of what is actually happening. It's not just a black box that's coming out with decisions. How do we understand exactly how those decisions are made, and are they being made appropriately for our society? The challenge, as you raised, though, is having a framework that's quick is tough. One solution that I've been working on is, and I've discussed this with our students earlier, is legislation dealing with the procurement process for government. That's in my agency. So that's in the government affairs part. And so the government right now purchases a lot of artificial intelligence systems. It's going to be even more. And these are some pretty significant decisions that could be made, like benefits. If you apply for a benefit, you may not have a human making that decision. It's going to be an AI system. We want to make sure there's not bias. You want to make sure there's full transparency. In fact, I've actually had one of my bills signed into law was to allow someone who has an AI system determine something, you can appeal it to a human being if you don't like it. So you have some oversight, which is important. But you got to have those systems in place. But regulating it is tough. So I'm going to use the procurement system, which says that if you're going to sell an AI system to the United States federal government, it has to meet a certain standard. And the standard will be different depending on the amount of risk that you have. So if you have a fully autonomous, lethal drone powered or controlled by AI, that's a really high standard. If you've got predictive maintenance with vehicles, that's a lower standard. And then design a system to make sure there's safeguard guardrails without inhibiting innovation. And I think that'll drive the whole economy in a lot of respects, because the federal government is the largest purchaser of goods and services in the world. We're the biggest customer there is in the world. And when the biggest customer in the world says you got to meet these standards, people will meet those standards. And if you're a small business owner and you want an AI system, you'll probably ask the question, does this meet the standards to sell to the U.S. government? And if the U.S. government won't buy your system, why should I buy it?
Well, one of the students also asked about drones, and we had those flurry of drone incidents on the East Coast and out west earlier in the year. I was sitting on my front porch in Kentucky over the weekend in my second home, and I swear I saw 2 or 3 drones fly by in this little remote area. Now it was late and there was bourbon involved, so it might not have been. But
I'm surprised you only saw 2.
I know, it's progress. So I just wondered, Gary, I mean, you've been involved in regulating or trying to figure out how to make sure the security aspects of drones are addressed. And you said you told the students that one of your biggest advocates for this is the National Football League.
That's right. Yeah, I have legislation trying to pass through Homeland Security to expand the authorities as to who can basically counter these drones, bring them down. They do present a significant threat. Just being in the air, they can present a threat, particularly if they're near airports and wherever there's aircraft. So the FAA is obviously very engaged, but they can also be easily weaponized. To step back, I mean, if you're looking at drones and how it's really changed dramatically, warfare is really pretty striking. We're seeing it in Ukraine right now, where very inexpensive drones are being used in a way that defeat multi-million-dollar weapon systems with a drone that's worth a couple $1,000s.
It's going to change warfare, isn't it?
It's changing it completely. The speed of it changes. There's a book that I read about. Actually, we saw getting in the weeds here with Nagorno-Karabakh, actually war where there's a book. It's 7 seconds to death. That if you're in a location now as a soldier, if you don't move in 7 seconds, you're probably going to be dead. I mean, it's moving so quickly, and drones are a big part of all of that happening. So now take those weaponization on the battlefield and bring it to the homeland, which is why the NFL is concerned. They've already had several drone incursions for games. You may have been watching an NFL game that they have to hold for a while because there's a drone. They got to get it out, figure out who that is, and get it out of there. Not to give people nightmares tonight, but just imagine a grenade on one of those drones flying into not just an NFL stadium, but anywhere else. It's a frightening prospect. So but the federal government has, Homeland Security has those authorities, but we're going to need to have local authorities are going to have it too. The Michigan State Police and others, whenever we have big events, we're going to have to be able to guard against these things and to take them down. And that's what the legislation does. It has strong support from folks here. Oakland County, actually, Sheriff Bouchard's been a big supporter. They have quite a sophisticated operation in Oakland County, but others do around the state as well in order to protect ourselves.
So, Gary, few things have divided the nation recently as much as Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency. We've got a $2 trillion deficit again this year. $37 trillion national debt, and yet there's been so much pushback against this idea of cutting and making drastic cuts in the government. If we don't do this now, when will we do it? And if this isn't the right way, how should we be cutting back the size of government?
Yeah, and I'm all about, we have to bring down the deficit. There's no question about that. We have to save money. Some of those bills that I had signed into law save billions of dollars. So this has been a focus of mine, too, to bring that down. I think the issue that I have with DOGE is not that we're trying to figure out ways to do things more efficiently and deliver services to people in a more effective way. It's how it's been implemented just kind of across the board in an indiscriminate way, which doesn't make sense to me. And I'll give a couple examples. So, part of what they were going through, and they're saying you basically have to fire all of the probationary employees that have come into the federal government. But let folks know it's not just new people that are probationary. So in the way the federal government works in the civil service is that if you are promoted, so if you are an outstanding employee, there's a management position you get promoted into, but you're probationary for a couple of years in that position. So what we had people who were promoted because they were the best of their best that got fired. So can you imagine that? All of our business folks here, you tell your employees, you're a great employee, I'm going to promote you, and then I'm going to fire you. Congratulations. Makes no sense whatsoever.
Is there an avenue for Democrats to work with the administration to accomplish the same goal?
Yes, and I think, and I'm willing to work as long as it's a way that's thoughtful about where do we need to cut, where do we need to save money. I will just tell you, I'm going to give you another example. I just spent, last Friday I was down in Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, Gitmo, and part of the administration are to send folks down there before they get deported. We have people who we are afraid of, who have done bad things, we have to deport them. I'm all on board. I'm Homeland Security. These people are bad dudes. They got to go. But it's a question of how you do it. Can we do it in a cost-effective way? So they're sending a few, and they have had a handful down there, and most of them were not the high-risk people. They were the low-risk people. And we calculated that operation, it was costing the federal government $20,000 a day per person to have them there. Now, I think that's crazy. We have a lot of top high security prisons in the United States. It doesn't cost $20,000 a day. And then we find out that we had 14 people come in while we were there. They had a 737 jet that brought the 14 people down. And they were saying, well, they'll probably be there a couple weeks, but then we'll fly them back to Louisiana before we extradite them back to Honduras or wherever it may go in Latin America. And I'm like, could you just keep them in Louisiana? To that. So actually, I'm writing a letter to Musk and DOGE. Look at that. Let's try to save some money.
There you go. So speaking of immigration and the borders, southern border seems like it's coming under control, but your focus has been on the northern border.
Right.
You started a center for the northern border at Selfridge, and you've worked closely on border security with our border with Canada. Is that border secure? I know Trump used border security and fentanyl smuggling and illegal crossings as justification for his tariffs. Is that border secure?
Yeah, well, nothing's 100% secure, so you have to be focused on it. We're in a much better, without question, a much better situation on the northern border than we are on the southern border. Significant challenges there. But the northern border is an issue. You have human trafficking, you have fentanyl coming across, as you mentioned. But to put it in perspective, the amount of fentanyl that's come across the northern border, I'm trying to remember the exact number. It was like 40 pounds or so, which is a lot. It'd kill a lot of people. It's not acceptable to have 40 pounds. But in Mexico, or the southern border, it's tens of thousands of pounds.
Right.
So put that in perspective, tens of thousands of pounds versus 40. We want to stop it all, but it's different. But there are still issues of trafficking and illegal immigration that will come across. So we have to be coordinated. As I mentioned at the beginning of the program, they're probably our strongest partner. But I want to make sure we're coordinated from our level. On the southern border, there's a coordination center that coordinates all the Department of Homeland Security assets along the southern border. We don't have that on the northern border. And yet we have a long border from sea to sea. And I was able to write legislation, pass it, and fund it. And it's going to open on Selfridge Air National Guard base. That was no coincidence based on how we wrote the legislation, but I can't talk about that. But it will be at Selfridge. And that will coordinate all the operations across the northern border, and it'll happen here in Michigan. We're ideally located geographically. It's also the only base that has all the elements of Homeland Security: Border Patrol, the Air Marine Unit for DHS, the U.S. Coast Guard is there. It's going to be, and it'll help make sure that Selfridge, in addition to the missions that we want to get, and the KC-46s and others, in addition to that, it'll help make sure we keep Selfridge as a viable military base for years to come.
So before we turn it over to President Espy, who will have some questions from the audience, I want to note that the Center for Effective Lawmaking for the third year named you the most effective senator from either party. Again, first time anybody's been named 3 times in a row in a half a century. And you're not running again in 2026. You decided that you're going to step away from the Senate. And in reaction to that news, the Center said, their reaction was, it's now less clear who will serve as the most prominent legislative leaders in the future. With all the division in this country and with the severe crisis in leadership, even in your own party, or particularly in your own party, and sort of bipartisanship has become a lost notion or a lost ideal. Is this the right time for you to be stepping away?
Thank you, Noah. It is. I mean, it's a personal decision, and I'll say I'm going to continue to be involved. But it's something that when I came in, and you know my wife Colleen very well. She's my partner, and it was a joint decision, and something we've been thinking about for a long time. This is not related to the election results. And I'm a person who, when I got into, it was 16 years. So when I leave, it will be 18 years. When I ran for the House initially, served 6 years in the House, I always thought I'm not going to be here my whole life. I'm going to serve. It's kind of like what our founders, I think, said. You're a citizen first. You go, you serve in Congress, and then you go back to being a citizen, and you turn the reins over to new, fresh folks and young folks. And I think we got a lot of highly talented people here in Michigan that will rise to the occasion and will do a really good job. And so we felt comfortable doing that, and I'm still around 2 more years. So, as I joked with the students earlier, most people give 2 weeks notice. I have to give 2 years notice for my job, so it makes it a little awkward, but I'll still be working. And then I'm not retiring. When you leave the Senate, there's only one word, and that's retire, but you can actually go on to other things. And I plan to be very engaged in other things. I don't know what all that'll be, but being engaged in making sure we bring the country together. I mean, 2 things that I want to focus on. One is how technology is changing the world dramatically, and how do we make sure that everybody benefits from it? And that's going to be a real challenge. And how do we bring people together politically to deal with that significant challenge?
Well, thank you, Senator. And President Espy, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so I have some of the fun of asking about the audience questions. So you mentioned this retiring at a young 66. You have access to so much information relative to your roles on committees. What gives you the most worry for our future, and what makes you the most optimistic?
The worry is really what I'm seeing politically right now. And I worry a lot about this, back to the kind of the bipartisan aspect of it. Is that this country has just become so polarized. And a democracy just doesn't function when people aren't willing to come together and find common ground in order to get things done. And I've just seen this evolution of this over the last 16 years in Congress. It'll be 18 when I leave, 2 more years. But I have seen that continue to occur over that time. And, and it's becoming more intense. In fact, some of the academics have been looking at this. They're not talking it as polarization now. They're calling it sectarianism. And sectarianism is what you usually associate with religion. You got different religious sects, and you think the other person just doesn't have a different belief. You think they're the enemy, that you can't trust them. They have a completely different set of beliefs, and you can't find common ground. You think about those kinds of religious battles that unfortunately have dominated so much of human history. And that's what we're seeing now in politics. Some recent polling shows, for example, that a majority of Americans now say that they would be really disappointed if their son or daughter married someone of a different party. And when you think about that, really? I mean, you know, I understand those kinds of divisions in the past in religion and other aspects, but we can't get that. We can't, how do I work with someone in the other party if I think they're the enemy? If I think that they're just somebody I can't ever reach out to? I don't do that. I work together to do it. But we're finding more and more of that. And it's not just folks in Congress, it's the people who send us to Congress. So it's all the folks out in society who have also kind of doubled down on that. And so even if you take a position, for example, that's counter to what your party position is at that time, people like think you're a traitor. It's like, no, we have different views, but I share the same values. I want to get the same thing done. And so I just see that as just a dangerous trend of where we're going. And it's one that kind of hit me. It's a little longer answer here, but kind of hit me when I was reading George Washington's farewell address, which I'd suggest folks getting it. I hadn't read it before I was required to. And that's before the U.S. Senate. Every year a senator is asked to read George Washington's farewell address during President's Day. And a few years ago I was asked to do that. But the part that really gets you is he's talking about this young republic. And he said that, you know, his concern is that there'll be a demagogue that will rise up and appeal to people's passions and to their fears, and they will use their powers to divide people as opposed to bring people together. And he said, when that happens, our republic will disappear. This is George Washington there. So we just keep that in mind, not putting any names to anything, because it doesning matter who it is, wherever it is. We've got to protect that from the left or the right, or wherever it's coming from. We've got to remember that. We've got to be bringing people together. Now, having said that, you wanted me to be the optimism, and I'll say this country has gone through really tough times, so that's what brings optimism. We have gone through really hard times. The hardest, probably the Civil War, where we weren't just yelling at each other and finding out who yells the loudest. We were actually on a battlefield shooting at each other and killing our brothers just because they were in a different state. So, but we came through that. We were able to rise above that. And I believe that through that kind of crisis, we actually are stronger as a country, and we get our bearings. We lose our bearings, but we get them back. And I'm optimistic and confident that we can do that.
That's a good message for today. So you started the session talking a little bit about the rapid nature of the changes with the new administration. In some ways, that's highlighted the roles of the courts. Talk a little bit about the Supreme Court. Do you think it should be expanded to 9 justices, or what's a way forward?
Yeah, I don't support changing the 9 justices. You know, that is sad, and we've had some bad precedent about adding judges in the past, and I think you have that. But what concerns me is not the number on the Supreme Court. What concerns me is the fact that there's a lot of rhetoric out there now that is basically attacking judges. I'm going to go back to my founders here. I've been raising them quite a bit, but you know, the beauty of the Constitution is the balance of powers between 3 branches of government, and our founders did that for a good reason. They didn't trust any of us, so they wanted to have folks that would always be a counter to each other, and the courts are an important part of that, and they have to be the least political. We expect the presidency to be highly partisan. That's a given. You expect Congress to be partisan, you know, that's a given. I'm going to argue they're too partisan, but that's still a given at where we are. But we expect the courts to try to be the umpire on the field, rule the balls and the strikes. But we've seen that become increasingly partisan, unfortunately, and Supreme Court justices, you know, back before I served in the Congress, it was pretty common a Supreme Court justice would get 70, 80, 90 votes. Now it's strictly partisan. That's a really bad development. But what I really fear is that when people say we're not going to abide by a court decision. So as those of us who are in the other 2 branches, any kind of rhetoric coming from a politician that says, if that decision goes against us, why do I have to follow it, is really dangerous. When you talk about a constitutional crisis, that's when you have one. Is when people don't do that. Or they go after judges. They'll say, we're going to impeach that judge, not because there was a high crime and misdemeanor, but because we didn't like the opinion they gave. If you go after judges because you don't like the opinion they gave, we are in serious trouble. So I'm more concerned about that than the number of justices on the Supreme Court.
So let's talk a little bit about the human side of leadership. There was a story in the Detroit News this morning about young men feeling disconnected from opportunity. What's your advice to some of our men earlier in their career of how to chart a path forward?
Yeah, it's something I'm very worried about, and I wish I had the answer to that. In fact, I've been reading a book, what's the title of the book that I read recently, but is that young folks are, and it's young people, it's also young women. We're seeing higher levels of mental illness, higher levels of very high anxiety among young people. To me, this is a crisis situation now, and it's building even more so. There's a lot of reasons for it. I mean, one of the reasons cited is social media, too, and how social media has brought people into rabbit holes that add to the anxiety that people have. So I don't have a great, easy answer right now, but I would caution folks, stay off social media for a little bit. Be free of that kind of stuff, because I think it's having an impact on adults, let alone young people, and particularly young children. I'm really concerned about children who are in their tweens and teens that are in this, and the anxiety that it brings about people. That has to be something we're really focused on.
So we have about 4 minutes left. I know this is the DEC favorite lightning round questions, and you can imagine for a senator who rides a Harley, these can be kind of fun. So tell us one of your favorite songs.
Favorite songs?
Why?
One of These Nights by the Eagles.
Ah, there you go. That's an old school favorite.
Eagles. Not a lot of people probably know the Eagles. That's for my high school students. That was a group. That was a group for the high school students. It was a really good group too. Check it out. Don't go on social media though to check it out.
Okay, favorite movie.
Favorite movie, because the favorite movie is because what I wanted to be when I grew up. I did not want to be a senator. That was not on my that wasn't on my bingo card as I grew up. What I really wanted to be was a fighter pilot. I just dreamed of flying and be a fighter pilot, but unfortunately I had these, and I guess you can get operations now, but you couldn't do that when I was there. So of course my favorite movie is like Top Gun. I love Top Gun.
And the Redux too, there you go. Okay, so as an ardent supporter of our state, of labor, and our well-known work ethic, tell us about your very first paying job.
So my
Your very first job that
first
paid
paying
you.
job. So
Back.
yeah, I know the first paying job. I have a story behind it. Do you want to hear the story why?
Yes.
So you mentioned I'm an avid motorcyclist, but it started at a really young age, about 12. And so I really, really wanted a mini bike. I just really wanted this. And my mother said, there's no way you're getting a mini bike. You know, you're way too young. And she said, the only way you get that is if you pay for it yourself. She thought, okay, that's done, walked away. So then I found out I could get a paper route. So I could deliver, remember those newspapers that were paper and all that for?
Remember them well.
So I got a paper route. It was for the Pontiac Press up where I lived up in Oakland County.
That's awesome.
And I delivered the paper, which was a great experience because you're actually your own business person. You know, you buy the papers, then you got to sell the papers, then you got to collect money from people, which is really hard, and to do all that to pay for it. But I started the paper route, and then I raised enough money for my mini bike, and I went to my mother and I said, I've got enough money. And she just was like, okay, you raised the money, you get it. And so that job got me, I learned some small business techniques and my first mini bike.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so let's close with, of course, the favorite advice to your 25-year-old self. What advice would you give yourself now with all the knowledge and experience you've accumulated to the 25-year-old?
Yeah, I guess the advice that I would give to our 25s and all of our high schoolers is to take risk, to take challenges. It's easy to kind of fall into kind of a pattern with your life, but the only way you really learn and you grow is to take a risk. And it's scary. It's really scary. At times I didn't take risks, but when I have taken risk, what I've learned in taking risk is that you don't always succeed, but I usually learn more when I fail than when I succeed. Because when I succeed, I think, wow, man, I was really smart, wasn't I? That was really great. And you may not have been, but you just feel that. But when you lose, you actually do some self-reflection. You actually think through, you know, what happened here, and it sets you up for future success. So I'd say always be willing to take risk in your life That's the way you'll grow.
Well, isn't that wonderful advice from our senator? Join me in thanking Senator Peters and Nolan Finley for moderating. Thank you all.
Senator, that's great advice. I thought maybe you were going to add also for Brother Gary to eat his beets. Got to do that. We got to keep you healthy. So, Senator, thanks for being such a strong example of leadership for us and for your service to the state and our country. We want you back here before your term ends, please. We'd love to have you back here. And Nolan and Dr. Espy, thanks so much for your important roles today. Ladies and gentlemen, tell your friends and colleagues to join the Detroit Economic Club. As you can see, we're a very cool group of people, and we like to be on time every time. So this meeting of the Detroit Economic Club is now adjourned. Thank you.